It is that time of the week. College football starts again tomorrow with a very interesting group of five game. Marshall, Boise State is the big one. I like Boise State to win this game, but I think the fact that they're coming off a big win over Florida State could cause this game to be close. Similarly, Auburn coming off a big win themselves, I could see that. I think they're going to struggle a lot more with Tulane than people think. I've been saying all week, I think Tulane's really underrated. Auburn has been known to mess around in these games before and against worse teams, and it's nearly bitten them. If they mess around with Tulane, this could be a close game. Another intriguing game this week, Syracuse, Maryland. Syracuse's offense did not look very good last week against Liberty. Maryland's offense, albeit against Howard, scored 79. I think this is a trap game. I think Syracuse is going to get caught looking ahead to the game against Clemson. I think Maryland wins this one in an upset. Another upset that I think is very likely to happen this week, I think Colorado with Steven Montez at quarterback and some great receivers, including Chenault, are going to upset Nebraska. I'm not sure why Nebraska was ranked to begin the season to begin with. I think they're overrated. I think Nebraska is going to come falling down to earth hard this weekend. As for falling down to earth, I think Texas also will come crashing down to earth a little bit. I think they'll realize they're a year away from actually competing for the playoff. I think LSU will win a close game in that. I just think LSU is better. I think they're more physical. I think they're tougher. I think they're quicker. LSU, to me, just seems like the better team in all phases of the game. It'll be a close game for sure, but I think LSU has the edge. In Knoxville, BYU, Tennessee, ordinarily a game of two 0-1 teams wouldn't really matter, but if Tennessee loses to BYU, Jeremy Pruitt might not survive the season. If Tennessee goes 0-2, both home games to start the year, the dumpster fire could get worse. A whole lot worse. Miami, North Carolina. That's another intriguing game. The North Carolina fan base very excited after their win over South Carolina, and it would be even more so if they can beat an actual legitimate team in Miami. I personally think Miami just has too much in the way of athletes. I think Manny Diaz, who was actually fired by Mac Brown at Texas, is going to be able to get his players to step it up a notch. I think Miami beats North Carolina soundly. I do not think this game is as close as many people might think. I think people are overreacting to North Carolina's win over South Carolina. I think Miami wins in a blowout, and North Carolina is another team that comes crashing hard back to earth. Elsewhere, UCF should have no issues with Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic, a disappointing team last year. Two trick games for this week. Two tricky games. Army, Michigan, and Cincinnati, Ohio State. Army and Michigan. Army with the triple option, choose clock, very efficient, although they struggled last week against Rice. But Army did take Oklahoma to overtime last year. They limited Oklahoma to 21 points in regulation. That's how effective they were at chewing the clock. So if Michigan struggles offensively, this could be a close game. Now, Cincinnati, Ohio State. Cincinnati is actually my pick to be the Group of Five representative in the New Year's Six this year, not UCF. Ohio State did not look good the final three quarters against Florida Atlantic, and they're going to need to play a whole lot better against a Cincinnati team that's got Michael Warren, who's a very good running back, and a very good defense, as is always the staples of a Luke Fickell team. And I think if Ohio State plays the way they did the final three quarters against Florida Atlantic, they could be in trouble. They could be in a lot of trouble. Do I think Alabama will cover against New Mexico State? Yes, I do. I wish Alabama wouldn't schedule these games, but I understand why they do it, and I absolutely think they will cover. If you're looking for an FCS over FBS upset this week, I'm going to go my most likely FCS over FBS. I'm going to go North Carolina A&T, a really good FCS team. I think North Carolina A&T could beat Duke. I think that has a very real, legitimate chance of happening. And some other teams that are desperate for a win, Missouri needs to win. After they lost to Wyoming, Missouri needs to beat West Virginia this week. And similarly for Purdue, who lost to Nevada, they cannot afford to lose to Vanderbilt. Michigan State plays Western Michigan this week. Their offense in their opener looked no better than it did last year. And while I was bringing up Nevada, they play Oregon, who's going to try and... I can see Oregon getting off to a slow start, a little hangover from the choke against Auburn, but I think Oregon will win that one easily. The game that I find most interesting out west, a battle of true freshman quarterbacks because both teams' starters are hurt. Stanford and USC in a pivotal Pac-12 game, and it might be a game that's pivotal for Clay Helton's job at USC. I'm going to pick Stanford. I like Stanford, their supporting cast, a little more than I like USC's. But if USC's season goes downhill again, could be the end for Clay Helton. And finally, the second biggest game of the week, Texas A&M Clemson. I know there's been some talk from Texas A&M about an upset. I don't like it when they do that. Underdogs that start talking usually get blown out, and quite frankly, I think Texas is going to win. I think Clemson's going to win this game by at least 21. Wouldn't be surprised if they win by 30, although that's unlikely. I think Clemson's going to win around, say 45-24. Maybe 38-17. But I really don't think Texas A&M has the firepower to compete with Trevor Lawrence and Clemson. And Trevor Lawrence is going to try and make up for a really bad performance last week against Georgia Tech. He was not great, threw a couple bad interceptions. I think he's on firing on all cylinders this time. I think Clemson wins handily. Now, that's not to say I think Texas A&M's a bad team, but they've got a brutal schedule, and quite frankly, the only game I could see them winning against another ranked opponent is against Auburn at home. And I've already said, I think if Auburn is still coming in on that high, they could be in for a tougher game against Tulane than people think. Tulane-Auburn is my under-the-radar game this week. Could be interesting. That is all for week 2. Can't wait to do this again next week.